For the first time, the EPA is now setting strict new drinking water limits for PFAS, those potentially toxic so-called forever chemicals found in communities across the country. Much of that contamination dates back decades, linked to firefighting foams used at military bases. Tonight in our Prime Focus, Devin Dwyer brings us an exclusive look inside the Pentagon's new push to clean up the chemicals and what's at stake in one Michigan community considered ground zero.
The wind-whipped water on Van Etten Lake in Oscoda, Michigan, washes up daily reminders of an environmental tragedy in Tony Spaniola's backyard.
Over the summer in 2017, we began to get reports of that the foam was contaminated. And that was kind of the initial red flags.
The suds on the surface are remnants of firefighting foam used at nearby Wurtsmith Air Force Base, once the home to America's fleet of B-52 bombers during the Cold War.
It was used 3, 4, 5 times a week in training, and they would foam down the entire runway areas. And here we are, many years later, still seeing and feeling the consequences.
The foam, developed by the military decades ago, contains per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, so-called forever chemicals because they never break down. They're highly effective at fighting fuel fires, but are also linked to heightened risk of liver damage, weakened immune systems, and cancer. More than 700 military communities like Oscoda are grappling with the dangers.
Why is this considered ground zero?
Well, because it's the first military installation in the world at which PFAS contamination was publicly reported. And it's the place where the Department of Defense, the largest PFAS polluter in the United States, developed its plan to address PFAS.
Oscoda was once a top spot for hunting and fishing on the shores of Lake Huron, but now faces a barrage of public health warnings 30 years after the airbase closed. Signs advise residents not to eat the fish they catch or the deer they kill because of PFAS contamination.
Just how toxic is it?
Well, you can't even touch it.
You can't touch. You're not supposed to touch PFAS.
Even to touch it, and that's why they've put this sign up and signs like this up all around public areas in Oscoda where the foam concentrates.
Nationwide, PFAS has been detected in drinking and groundwater supplies of 5,000 communities across all 50 states, with more than 60 million Americans at risk.
How much of the PFAS in these drinking water systems comes from contamination at military bases and the firefighting foam?
If you live in a place like Oscoda, a lot of the PFAS that's in your drinking water is coming from those military installations. If you don't live near a base, it's more likely that PFAS is coming from industrial releases.
The Defense Department has been studying the contamination in Oscoda for more than 13 years, but still does not have a comprehensive cleanup plan.
I mean, do you have any sense of how much it's going to cost to clean up Wurtsmith Air Force Base?
The last estimate I heard was about $250 million, and I think that's quite low. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 times that, maybe more.
The ripple effects from the military's PFAS contamination have been significant. 3 years ago, Tucson, Arizona, was forced to cut off a key source of drinking water during a drought because of an underground plume of PFAS from foam used at a military airbase.
This water treatment facility was designed to filter out 2 other toxic chemicals, but when PFAS arrived, city officials decided to shut it down.
We're saying to every other city in the country, this is an issue if you've got a military base in your community.
As recently as last year, the Pentagon defended PFAS foam as critical to the nation's defenses. But in late 2019, amid growing concern about health risks, Congress ordered it phased out at air bases by the end of this year.
It means, of course, people are going to be safer. We're going to be able to continue to put out jet fuel fires without contaminating service members and the neighbors of defense installations.
At Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida's Panhandle, another PFAS contamination site,
where the foam is at, it's out.
Military firefighters are now leading a transition to new foam developed without PFAS, known as F3.
So what we see here is the simulated aircraft mishap.
F3 will replace PFAS foam at military airfields around the globe.
You can see how hot the rocks are over there, so if you didn't have that foam present, then that fuel that's over there would reignite.
So there's no PFAS in this foam?
It's fluorine-free.
Kim Spangler is a chemist who heads the military's Environmental Research and Development Unit that helped create F3.
It took us 3 years. Typically, this takes something like 15 to 30 years, though, so this represents really a tremendous achievement.
Is F3 safe for the environment and safe for human health?
Yes.
How do you know?
We have very rigorous testing that we put it through to the new products through so that we can ensure that they're safe. These new F3 foams do not have the persistence in the environment.
Why should people have confidence in your assurances that it's safe?
We feel very confident that these foams perform as we need them to and that they truly and transparently meet the military specification.
We'll have to see. I've come to learn that even when you trust, you have to verify. You've got a real mess here, a real mess here.
Spagnola, who has spent years lobbying Congress and the Pentagon to do more to clean up PFAS, calls the new firefighting foam a big step.
Sort of give you hope that you've turned a corner?
Well, that's one corner. We're in the 15th year here of the investigation. We still don't even have a plan in place to attack it on an overall basis. That's way too long. And that's the corner that we need to turn.
A Defense Department strategy and price tag for cleaning up PFAS contamination nationwide isn't expected for at least several more years.
Why is it taking so long?
We want to make sure that we're making the right decisions and creating interventions that number one, work, right, but also are going to work in the long term.
What do you say, though, to some members of those communities who have heard this for years?
We recognize the frustration. We are equipping the communities with technical assistance.
In a memo to military branches late last year, Brendan Owens, an Assistant Secretary of Defense overseeing environmental cleanup, ordered immediate actions to stop the spread of PFAS contamination around bases while the plan is finalized. In Escoda, the Air Force says it will install 5 new groundwater treatment systems to block the underground flow of chemicals into Van Etten Lake.
You hope that what you're doing in Escoda, this sort of ground zero, could potentially be a pilot for other sites around the country.
Yeah, I don't hope that. That's what we're going to do.
Tony Spagnola is cautiously optimistic the Pentagon is finally taking PFAS contamination more seriously, but says so much more remains to be done.
There has been some really good momentum, but we're at a crossroads.
Will you see it cleaned up in this community in your lifetime, you think?
I hope so, but we never get our hopes too high here because we've been promised so much for so long, only to have been let down.
Still hope in the midst of all their disappointment. Our thanks to Devin for that.